The night was heavy with rain, and the sound of it striking the rooftop echoed through the quiet house like a heartbeat. I sat alone in the living room, the dim lamp casting a soft glow across the framed pictures of my late husband and his son Ethan. The clock's steady ticking filled the silence as I clutched a cup of tea that had long gone cold. It had been 2 years since my husband passed away, and though time had softened the sharp edges of grief, the house still felt empty without his laughter. Ethan, my stepson, had been distant lately, withdrawn, restless and burdened by emotions he refused to share. I tried to reach him many times, but grief builds walls higher than love can climb. When I heard the front door creak open, I turned. Ethan stumbled in, the bitter scent of alcohol trailing behind him. His eyes were glassy, his movements unsteady. In that moment, my heart broke, not out of anger, but out of helplessness. I wanted to reach him, to tell him he didn't need to drown his pain, but my voice froze in my throat. He brushed past me and went to his room, leaving me staring into the darkness, wondering if I had failed him as both a mother and a friend. Morning came with a dull light that seeped through the curtains. I made breakfast, though I knew neither of us had much appetite. Ethan emerged from his room with tired eyes and disheveled hair. I wanted to speak, to say how worried I had been, but instead, I quietly placed a plate before him. He didn't look up, just ate in silence, the scrape of his fork on the plate the only sound between us. I realized then that words alone couldn't heal what he carried inside. Grief had made him a stranger to himself, and I could only hope that love would one day bring him back. When he left the table, I stayed seated, staring at the empty chair across from me. It was once where his father sat, telling jokes that made us laugh till tears came. Now only silence remained, and I felt the weight of it pressing on my chest. That afternoon, I knocked gently on Ethan's door. He sat by the window, lost in thought, his father's old guitar resting on his lap. The strings were dusty, untouched for months. I sat beside him without speaking. After a long pause, I said softly, "He wouldn't want to see you like this." Ethan's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. His fingers brushed the strings lightly, producing a faint, broken note. "It doesn't sound the same," he muttered. "Nothing does." I placed my hand over his, feeling the tremor beneath his skin. "It doesn't have to," I whispered. "It just has to sound like you." He looked at me for the first time in days, and though no words followed, I saw a small crack in his armor, a sign that somewhere inside, he still wanted to be found. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Ethan began to change. He woke up earlier, helped with small chores, even smiled occasionally. I didn't push him to talk, instead I gave him space to breathe. Healing doesn't come through demands, it comes through quiet presence. One evening, as I watered the plants outside, I heard soft music from his room. The sound of the guitar floated through the hall, uncertain at first, then steady, warm. I stood by the doorway, listening. It was his father's favorite song, played not perfectly, but with heart. I closed my eyes, letting tears fall freely. It felt like his father was near again, not through memory, but through love reborn in Ethan's hands. But progress is never without pain. A month later, I found Ethan sitting on the porch steps, tears streaming down his face. He wasn't drunk this time, he was simply broken. He whispered as I approached. I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his trembling shoulders. "I know," I said softly. "So do I." He leaned into me, his body shaking with sobs. It was the first time he had cried in my arms, the first time he had allowed himself to be vulnerable. The moment stretched into eternity, and I held him tighter, silently promising that I would never let grief take him away again. After that night, we began to talk more, about his father, about memories, about the small things that made life feel human again. He told me how guilty he felt for not being there the night his father passed, how he blamed himself for things he couldn't control. I told him how his father loved him more than life itself, how proud he would be of the man Ethan was becoming. Through these late night talks, we began stitching together the torn edges of our hearts. Love doesn't erase pain, but it gives it meaning, and that meaning became the thread that bound us together. As months passed, Ethan found purpose again. He got a part-time job at a local bookstore, the same one his father used to take him to when he was a boy. The smell of old books, the soft hum of conversations, the quiet peace, it became his escape. Every evening he would come home and tell me about the people he met, the stories he heard. Our dinners grew lighter. Laughter replaced silence, and the house that once echoed with loneliness now held warmth again. Watching him heal was like watching spring return after a long winter. Then one day, I found a note on the kitchen table. "Thank you," it said in his neat handwriting, "for never giving up on me." I held the note against my heart, tears blurring my vision. That small piece of paper carried years of love, pain, and redemption. It reminded me that motherhood isn't defined by blood, it's defined by choice, by standing beside someone even when they try to push you away. I realized that love is not about saving someone, it's about showing them that they are worth saving. Time continued its gentle march. Ethan grew stronger, more confident. He enrolled in college, studying literature, the same passion his father once had. Every weekend he would visit his father's grave, placing a single lily from our garden there. I often watched from afar, feeling a quiet peace settle over me. The boy who once stumbled through the door lost and broken was now standing tall, his eyes clear, his heart full. The storm had passed, and in its wake, love had built something beautiful. Years later, on his graduation day, Ethan stood on stage, his voice steady as he gave his speech. "There was a time," he said, "when I thought I had no one left, but someone stayed. Someone believed in me even when I didn't. And that made all the difference." Our eyes met across the crowd, and I felt my heart swell with pride. That night he gave me his diploma to hold and said, "For you, Mom." It was the first time he called me that. I couldn't speak. I just hugged him, letting every unspoken emotion pour through that single embrace. Life moved forward as it always does. Ethan started writing small articles, poems, and stories about love and loss. Sometimes, he would read them to me, his voice calm and sure. One evening, he said, "I used to think losing Dad ended my story. But it didn't. It just changed it." I smiled. "That's what life does," I replied. "It changes, but it doesn't stop." He nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. The boy I once feared losing had grown into a man who understood the true meaning of love, loss, and resilience. Years later, I grew older, my hair turning silver. Ethan would visit often, bringing flowers and laughter with him. He would sit beside me in the garden, strumming his father's guitar, playing the same song that once brought him to tears. Now it brought peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he looked at me and said, "You know, that night I came home drunk. I thought my life was over. But it was just the beginning." I smiled and replied, "It was the night love started working its quiet miracle." And in that moment, everything came full circle. Love had transformed pain into purpose, grief into gratitude, and silence into song. Ethan's music filled the air, mingling with the gentle hum of the evening breeze. I closed my eyes, listening, not to the notes but to the story they told. A story of a broken boy and a woman who refused to stop loving him. A story of failure that became faith. And a story of how family, in its purest form, always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, remember, love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet presence that stays when everything else fades. Family is not built by blood alone, but by care, by forgiveness, and by the courage to love again. If you believe love can heal, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching family stories that remind us what truly matters. Because at the end of every storm, there's always a home waiting to welcome love back in.